feel free to unmute and you can share. I don't know. Are you a blend, Tammy?
No, I couldn't find you. I clicked something and you disappeared. So it was pure confusion. I wouldn't say that I'm any of those things, but closest to joy. I'm, coming close to moving to my dream job. So.
Ooh, very exciting. And Giovanna, that really resonated with you too. Joy. Okay.
Not necessarily like joy, but there's no other thing but sad stuff. So I'm like, I'm happy. I don't know, like I look at joy as different. Like I'm good. Like I'm not sad, I'm not disgusted, anger, nor fear. But joy is a high level of happiness that I'm not there. I'm not there right now. Tired? Just tired one. Sleepy? No, but like I'm not sad or anything. So that's a good thing. I'm not like there's none of the other ones that resonate either. So I guess closest to joy. I'll take closest to joy.
Closest to joy. All right. And Erin is there too. And then Sabrina is excited for Nick to be coming on over and show all the awesome things happening. So, all right. So on the screen, you're going to notice our agenda for today. And of course, the what column, as you know, include our objectives. So take a moment now to review what we'll be covering today. And Janelle, are you able to drop that link for the interactive agenda in there? What you'll notice today is that there are some hyperlinks so that you can save these things or revisit this folder later. And yeah, with that being said, go ahead and take a moment to review and set an intention for your participation today. And that will just help us to stay focused on our topics and what's most important to you. And yeah, get ready to go. Oh, I'm skipping, sorry. Travel screen. Get together here. Right, anything piquing your interest that you see right now or things that you're curious about?
No.
Okay, all right, ready to go. All right. Okay, so set your intention just again to make the most of our time together today. As you can see, we will be exploring emotional resilience, and this comes from Elena Aguilar's work through her book called Onward. And this is the perfect time for this topic. I don't want to get too far away from it with my excitement, but I just read the chapter on like taking care of yourself, and I do want to preach that to all of you today. You model for everyone else in your building what self-care looks like and what well-being looks like. And at this time of year, as you'll see, this is when that starts to change. So just be thinking about yourself today and then how that translates into those who you're mentoring and your staff as well. All right, so as I mentioned, our time together today is going to be focused on the topic of emotional resilience. So just on your own, if you have somewhere to like jot something down or be thinking about a recent emotional experience that you want to reflect on. So in a couple of sentences, describe kind of what happened and name the emotion and the degree of intensity you experienced. So just thinking about something. So I'm going to give you just a couple minutes here to think of an experience. This can be related to work or just related to your personal life as well. right, hopefully you're able to have something in mind because we are going to return to that in a little bit. All right, and as I was talking about this time of year, right, November 1st, I cannot even believe it's November today already. But this chart focuses on a first-year teacher's attitude toward teaching, but it's really relevant for any educator throughout the school year. So what do you notice about this chart? You can just unmute to share your thoughts. What do you notice?
I notice we are at the bottom of survival at this point. Uh-oh. I mean, things are only going to get better from here. It's going to drop. It's dropped dramatically. Everybody's in a very sad state, it looks like.
Okay. What else? What else do we notice?
I noticed that anticipation is in July and August, but it goes up as they get closer to seeing the kids. But it's amazing to me that survival sets in that fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so this is when things start to get hard, right? We have people coming back to school. They're like, it's a new year. I'm off to a fresh start. And then we are in school. And then in the beginning months, the students are like, okay, I'm unsure. I'm trying to feel everything out. Same with your teaching staff, etc. And then people get comfortable, right? And sometimes we'll see that uptick in student behaviors and sometimes even in our staff behaviors. And so this is the time of year when educators may really start to feel down. We're about to fall back. It's dark when we get up. It's dark when we go home, all of those things. But with the correct tools and strategies, we'll be able to kind of curb some of that, and maybe you'll be able to utilize this information to help support your team, and again, those that you're supporting through mentoring. And what we're going to call that today that we're working on is emotional resilience. All right, so the definition, we have two things that we've talked about, a little bit of emotional intelligence, which we've done some work with Jess Glass through that EQ 2.0 book, and then emotional resilience. So can I just have one person to read out loud our definition of emotional intelligence for the group?
Emotional intelligence is the ability to be aware of, manage, express one's emotion, as well as the ability to perceive, understand, interpret, and respond to the emotions of others.
Thank you. That's our EI, as we call it. What about emotional resilience?
I can read it. Emotional resilience is how fast we rebound from adversity and how we handle stress, setbacks, change, and struggle.
Right. So today, again, we're working on how to build resilience and how to say, even though this is hard, I can do it and I can work past through these things and think about them in different ways. And so the first tool that we're going to use today to bring self-awareness to our emotions is this, the Core Emotions resource. And thank you, Janelle, for jotting that down in the chat. And so earlier, we were like, well, maybe I don't fit into one of these things, but I want you now to think about the strong feeling that you wrote down during our Do Now time together today. So take a moment to kind of read through these emotions and figure out which core emotion your scenario that you were thinking about connects with the best. As you're thinking about this, you're going to notice how there's some strong emotions that we tend to recognize easiest, like frustration, anxiousness, or enthusiasm, are shades of bigger core emotions that are here. Right. Is anyone willing to share out what their core emotion was or their big feeling was connected to?
Well, I did a personal and a professional one.
Okay.
My personal one was connected to fear,
Hmm.
and my professional one is connected to anger.
Okay. Was the were those the words that you used to describe like your feelings, or is it one of the words that was listed?
It was one of the words that was listed.
Okay.
So let me choose. I'm trying to pull this thing up with all the words. I would say fear would be, I was worried more.
Okay.
And the anger would have been, I'm having trouble putting a word to it, I think.
Okay. And do we really, when we think of ourselves as worrying about a particular situation, was it surprising to you that worried fell under fear at all?
Yes. And I'm switching to disgust because offended is the word I'm going to use.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. The first time that I did this activity, I did this in the summer, and I had a situation which I may or may not like talk about today, but it was personal. And I was definitely feeling agitated. But what I noticed from this core emotions document is that my agitation actually fell underneath two things. It fell underneath fear and it fell underneath anger. And at first I was like, well, I definitely know I'm angry. I'm about to yell at somebody on my phone right now, right? But I didn't necessarily see that as a fear. But as I reflected on that, I'm like, oh, I guess maybe I was a little bit fearful as to like how this situation would turn out. So I could see where that was connected. So this tool is, again, used to just help us name an emotion. And we're going to look at another tool that's going to help us take that emotion and then change the story that we're telling about it. So let's explore in just a moment. So this one is called the cycle of an emotion. And this is to help us bring that self-awareness to that. So you can find the graphic has just been dropped in the chat, or this is linked in your interactive agenda as well. And so as we begin to think deeper about our own emotional resilience, we have to kind of wrap our heads around what an emotion actually is. An emotion is a reaction to an event, right? Something happens, your mind processes it really quickly, and then your body responds to it. Then you behave in response to your mind's interpretation and your body's response. So an example here might be prompting event. A principal called me into her office to tell me that she set up with a meeting with parents in my wing after I already told her I wanted to meet with the parent first. So it's like from a dean perspective, right? Then I interpreted, this is the why. I interpreted this as the principal wanted to handle the meeting herself because the first meeting I held didn't go so well. So now I'm into that physical response. Like, how am I feeling? I'm feeling my stomach tighten, my heart's racing, my face might have been turning red. The urge to act looks like I wanted to just leave the room, right? And then the action, what did I actually do? What did I say? I just said, okay, although I'm sure the principal knew I looked a little bit upset. And then what were those after effects? I felt sick all day. I felt angry. I feel like maybe she's trying to catch me messing up so she can, terminate my employment. So that's kind of how the cycle of emotion and all of the pieces that we go through. And we may not be thinking about these things because typically something happens, we react to it, but we may not be understanding that these are all of the pieces that happen through this cycle of an emotion. So in your interactive agenda, and Janelle also just dropped it in the chat for us, you're going to find the get to know an emotion cycle. So go ahead and click on that now. And while you're reading this Get to Know an Emotion cycle, I'd like you to think about where in your cycle that we just kind of talked about, but relating to your emotion that you brought up earlier in your do now, where do you think you could most easily make a change to steer your experience in a different direction?
Repeat your question, William. Oh, no, it's right there. Forget it.
It's right here on the screen. Yeah. So thinking about as you read the Get to Know an Emotion cycle, go ahead and think about where in the cycle do you think that you would most easily make a change to steer your experience in a different direction. So we'll take a few minutes here for you to do that. All right, so as you reflected on your emotion cycle, where did you see like you could easily make a change? Go ahead, Aaron.
For me, it was interpretation,
Mm,
because when something happens, your interpretation of what happened is what's going to actually drive the response. And so for me, that's that spot, that's that transitional spot that I can very well steer it into another direction. But it's going to be based on how I interpret what happened, you know.
yes.
Um,
Mhm.
and then that's going to drive my response to it, because it's not about what happens to you, it's about how you respond to it. And so for me,
Exactly.
it would be that interpretation spot within that cycle.
Mhm. Yeah, because we're really quick to react because we're basing that on how we interpreted something, right? But that may be the incorrect interpretation. So thank you for sharing. Anyone else care to share about a particular area that you could just go ahead.
I initially went with 4. I like the way that Aaron viewed it, though. It really is your interpretation, but I took it as sometimes, it's hard to control it. Just that gut automatically responds until like, this is how you interpret stuff. And then, but I love the way Aaron thought about it. And then your body physically responds. So I thought with that urge to act, after you've interpreted wrong, because that's what we do as humans, and you
Right.
basically, a lot of times, you always like steer towards the side of negative, you're negative. So then
Mhm.
then your body responds to that. But then when you have a moment to kind of calm yourself down, and before you respond, I think that's where I could have the biggest impact, because at number 4, the urge to act, I then can reframe myself to know that when I do go to act on number 5, that I can respond appropriately. So I thought that urge to act is that time for me to do that.
Yeah, maybe like, let me just take a minute here so I can really process through everything that I'm thinking and feeling. Yeah, that makes sense. So for everyone, these can fall in like different places. For me, I was even connecting it to like my physical response. Like, okay, maybe this isn't going how I want. Let me just take a couple of deep breaths right before I move on. All right. So as you look at this table, what do you notice about this table? And how might interpretations influence the principal's resilience here? So what do you notice as you look at this?
I think it supports what Aaron was saying. I think it's all in how you interpret what's going on and how you're responding to that. Are we looking at it in kind of like a negative lens, which is X, just automatically assuming the worst? Or are you principle Y with more so you're curious instead of automatically defensive? Not that principle Y has the answer, but they're just the curiosity of a more so and just sort of automatically going negative.
Yeah, I like that word curious, right? One of my favorite people, Janelle, don't laugh at me, but my Michael Bungay Senior with the coaching habit and the advice trap, that's what he talks about all the time, is being a little bit more curious. And when you're more curious, as Ravana has said, those principle Ys are going to be around a little bit longer, right? They're not going to like principle X. What's going to happen if principle X keeps feeling and interpreting everything this way? What's going to happen?
I mean, principle X would be what Michael Stack loves to call the person that climbs the inference ladder every time, something is said, instead of, being open to what's happening or what could be. So you already close yourself off before the conversation ever happens.
Right. Yeah. So like principal X, I don't see principal X making it, right? Principal X is going to burn out. It might start like playing into like their staff. Their glint's probably not going to look the greatest, right? As we go on this. So I want us to focus a little bit more on the question, like from our emotion cycle and where we can actually make the change, right? Because the story that we tell ourselves is really powerful. A tough situation with that dean at the bottom can go from, he doesn't respect me, to, I'm wondering what's going on and let me see how I can help support my dean, because these behaviors, like something else has to be going on. This isn't about me. It's about how I can support that person. So the stories that we tell ourselves about these emotional experiences or an event can either boost our resilience or undermine it. And so with that, we want to say interpretation of these situations really is everything, and how we look at things can really make a difference. So our next activity to look through can also be found in your interactive agenda, or Janelle has dropped that into the chat, and it's called Take Apart That Thought. So let's take some time to explore this. This process might be a little bit uncomfortable at first, but it's worth taking the time to do so. And while you're reading this, I'd like you to think about, what is the benefit of interpreting a thought with a different lens? And as you're done, as you finish up like reading that part, go ahead and just unmute to share with the group your thoughts on the benefit of thinking about that in a different way.
I mean, the simple act of processing a thought before you act on a thought. I mean, if we're talking about what, benefit it could be to answer these questions, it's just like anything, like when you have a teacher that wants to have a tough conversation and you role model it together, what that can look like. The further away you get from the moment of the issue, the easier it is to deal with when you can process. It's the fact of being able to do that, doing this enough so that when it comes on the fly, you can do it quickly. Hope I make sense.
Yeah, you are making sense, right? Like the more you practice thinking in this kind of way, the easier it is when you have some challenges that pop up and to think, well, maybe I don't know the full story and how else can I explore this, right? And often even that first question, like, is it true, right? When you have parents coming to you or you have one of your two principals coming to you and saying what about the situation, like let's time out here, let's take a moment and let's talk about what is true here and like what do we know, and then let's work through it in that way. And so with that, I kind of just gave one example, but let's look at the second question here. But like, why is this emotional resilience work important for ourselves and for our year 2 principals? How do you see this possibly like being used with them?
To be honest with you, I think it's just like a great resource to like identify feelings, right? I mean, I think everybody could use that in life, so that they like can connect with you to be like, that's actually how I'm feeling and I need to reframe it. Because I think just calling it out to them, like, you think these thoughts all this time, you're not going to want to be a leader, right? So you have to give people the benefit of the doubt and be able to like manage your emotions and be able to identify them. So I think this should be part of one of our sessions with them. I think that's great.
Oh, good. Thanks, Sabrina. Yeah, it's another way to think of things. Anything else that you want to add? Anyone else?
Well, I took the first image that you presented, the phases of a first year teacher's attitude towards teaching. I think that's more beyond just first year. I think that's just all of us. And so I always call it the October slump, is that when the things start going downhill for my team. And so I think that acknowledgement on top of the take apart, when they're getting dumped on by everything because everyone's feeling this ick in October about education, teaching, parents, deans, everyone involved, I think that they can process through this take apart to know that everything is not necessarily true in the way that we interpret it. But if we break this down and go through the steps, we may realize that there is a bigger picture and we can get to the root cause of whatever is causing people to be disgruntled and they be more proactive instead of reactive. That's how I kind of merge the two from the image to the take apart.
I love that. And you're right, Giovanna. That's why I did share that image with everybody today. This is not just what happens with our first year teachers. This happens with us, our deans, and the rest of our staff. But because we're acknowledging it, that's at this time of year, we have an awareness. And now we can say, well, what are we going to do about it? So yes, using some of these resources that we've gone through today, the core emotions resource, the cycle of an emotion, and take apart that thought is really good practice for people to think about how they're responding to others, right? So hopefully you found this valuable today in speaking about the emotional resilience. And now we're going to jump in to your time, which is collaboration. So before we get into our next preparing for our next 3 principal cohort meetings, I wanted to provide you with a couple of reminders. The first is just to leverage your Google Classroom. So if you are sharing resources, feel free to drop them in the stream or to drop them underneath those particular dates. I I think somebody asked me something about sharing the presentation, and I don't know that sharing the presentation is really like a resource for them at this point, as it's more of like how to guide the conversation through our meeting. But if you do have resources that you want to be added into your Google Classroom, feel free to add those in. Or if you need my support in doing that, please reach out to me and I'm more than happy to slide your things in. I do have copies because some of you have been doing recordings that I was going to move over there. But again, if you have other things, just let me know and I can support you with that. The next piece is also taking attendance. So you should be receiving a report of who was present and who was not at your sessions. But I think maybe like one person put in attendance, like maybe for the first time. So if you haven't recorded attendance, if you could go back and put that attendance in there. And if you're like, I really have no idea where this is, please let me know that. I do know that some of our year 2 principals may not have been like showing up. And so reach out to them and just say, hey, you know, are you okay? How's it going? How can I support you so you can attend these meetings? But if it is persistent, then let me know so that I can support you with that. And then the final reminder is just to ask your year 2 principals to take the survey at the end of your session so that we can keep getting the feedback there. Any questions about any of these 3 items? Okay, if something else comes to you later, just let me know. All right, so this meeting is for us to prep for these next 3 cohort meetings. So we won't be back together until I believe February, but we'll confirm that on one of my final slides. And so your next meeting is November 15th, except for Erin, because Erin, your meeting is moved to, I think, the 17th, which we've already made that change, December 13th, and then January 17th. And so now it's time for us to determine a problem of practice for our next 3 meetings. And so there's a couple of resources here. Of course, we have our NHA priorities, our ABCDE pieces, as well as the school quality cycle. Has everybody seen the school quality cycle? Yes? Yes, okay. So at the beginning of the year, it was about starting fast, and we shared that starting fast document with you. And now the middle part of the quality cycle is sustaining momentum. And so those focus areas, thank you, Janelle, for dropping those documents into the chat, are there. Unit unpacking, lesson prep, common assessments, responding to data in PLCs, implementation of the instructional coaching cycle, and so on and so forth.
The actual documents did not upload, just the words.
What didn't?
The last 2 things that were.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Here they come. Let's see. Thanks, Janelle. All right. So as we think about our problem of practice for these next 3 months, what's a question that you think is timely and relevant to what the principals may be experiencing? Go ahead, Sabrina.
So I actually don't know if I'm answering your question directly, because what I did in my last meeting is I asked the principals what they want to explore as their problem of practice going forward.
Okay.
So I don't know that necessarily you would say that's timely, but all of them unanimously out of the 4, there's 3 there, wanted to talk about managing their time with the CNI visits. So apparently, you know, CNI is visiting like a ton, everybody lately. And they are struggling with figuring out how to prioritize the feedback to teachers, as well as like how to create their schedule for the day. And so like, I don't know if that's okay, or if you're wanting us to specifically go off these ideas you're giving us, but that's what we're working on next month. And my plan was at the end of the session to say to them, what do you want to work on the next month? So I can use this to give them ideas. But I really wanted them to drive it, if that's okay.
Yes, of course that's okay. That's great. I mean, that's the whole purpose of them coming together, and we want them to find these sessions valuable. And if they're talking about something that's important to them, then they're likely to be there and to drive change in their practice. So that's perfect. I do want to put this plug in your ear, and I don't know if you've all been hearing your DSQs talking about PLCs lately, but the PLC piece is connected to the D in development. And I do know that they, at their last year's meeting, because they have those on Fridays, that they were talking about PLCs. Because I heard Wendy delivered an amazing presentation, and I was wondering, because I saw it in two of the DSQs stuff that I support, and they had brought up PLCs, and I said, did something happen last Friday where you guys were talking about PLCs? And they both had told me yes. So just something that you may want to explore, especially if you have a good PLC practice in your building, or somebody has a good PLC practice, how they could maybe like replicate that, or if you have some forms or best practices around that. Because some people are finding it a struggle to consistently implement PLCs in their buildings. So that was kind of one of the things that I was thinking about, like what's a barrier to consistently implementing PLCs, especially in middle schools where people don't have the same prep times, and like, and maybe they are departmentalized, like, so how they're doing that. So that's something just in my partnerships that has been coming up that I did want to share. Any other like topics that you all feel are coming up that could potentially lend themselves to good problem of practice questions?
We've been doing a lot with O3 and observing and doing joint observations or walkthroughs with the whole team. So this has been an ongoing conversation. So we're at the point where they're gonna bring O3 notes to talk about whether it happened or not, whether some of what we did talked about worked, I guess.
I love that. That's that artifact piece that we were talking about too. Like, what are we asking them to bring to the meeting so that it's not just hypotheticals. Let me talk about this and tell you that I'm doing it, but really I've done nothing. So that's great. All right. Any other thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
Mine were just talking about their Glint survey and how, and then also with coaching, how to provide feedback to maybe their dean that's struggling the most on the Glint survey based on the results, but also how to bring about a change to increase it is what they were asking about. And then they were also discussing with me, then that steered to someone else saying, yeah, I just need some support with how to have those difficult conversations with my deans where I'm not making them feel defeated, but I want to make sure it's direct enough that I'm going to see a change.
I love that. I think a lot of people are struggling with that, right? And it is the Glint time of year. Great. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, we did the same thing in lines with what Giovanna's talking about, because I wanted our sessions to be more meaningful, and so we talked about what was hot and burning at the time where we met, and obviously it was Glint. And then my thought for this next one, so we'll have a round of interim one data in. And so I'm not making the assumption that they know what a school-wide data dive looks like, right? Concerning interim data, and then breaking it down per wing, in terms of what does 3.8 look like? What does 3.5 look like? What does 6.8 look like? What needs to happen? Have they gone through their grade books and pulled the analytic reports? Look at that standard grid report, to look at, next step guidance, for math, to look at that questions report and see what standards kids are still struggling with. So I didn't necessarily make the assumption that they knew that. We kind of had some preliminary discussion on that. I've got some solutions for them, but I want them in some documents to use, but I want them to go through that whole problem of practice protocol to get to that. So I'm leaning I'm leaning with Giovanna and Tammy in terms of what's hot and burning. I mean, it's
Mhm.
we can pull some, some questions from this document, but
Mhm.
I think we take away from the real authenticity when they've got something really on their hearts that's current,
Right.
and we're pushing them to something that's really not current in their view. And I think that helps them become better decision makers in terms of what, if they can live in the now and
Mhm.
address the now, I think they'll be better off. And then as they move forward and get more experience, they'll be able to then forecast things moving forward.
Right. Being proactive. Yeah. And that interim stuff really connects to like the PLC piece.
So,
as well.
Aaron, what question do you think you would ask them to think about? Like, how would you phrase it?
How would I phrase the interim conversation?
Yeah. What would be the question you would ask?
The question would be, now that y'all making me go on the fly with this. I like
I'm
that.
so sorry.
I'm actually pretty good on the fly. My question would be, with the interim results, what plan can we create to address the data that we see?
And then you just let them talk that out.
Specifically deficits, right?
Okay.
And just kind of thumb through it. I mean, obviously you take one subject at a time, you take ELA, and then you take math. So your problem of practice for ELA may be different from math because the data may look different, in terms of what your concern areas are. So I would, and I probably would wordsmith it a little more than that, but that would be kind of an example of a question, Tammy, just to kind of generate some thoughts and some conversation, and really around that. And then what is the process of you analyzing your data, right? And that one can tie more to what Emily was talking about with the PLCs, because we actually have within our calendar, we have calendarized data dives that's built in our calendar. And so next Friday is one of those days that we're going to dive school-wide, right? And then we'll break. So I present the school-wide data, and then I break them into their wing dean teams, and then the SPED team breaks out, and then my leaders then facilitate and lead those conversations. So that's just an example of a question. I don't know if it's a good one, but it was on the fly one.
Thank you.
All right. So let's take a few minutes to jump in to your kind of presentations. So one of the things, again, this is in our Google Drive and then in your folder, and you should all have access to these now. One of the things that you're going to notice that's different is on the first slide. The first slide that I've put in these presentations for you is a hidden slide. And what you're going to notice, what you're going to notice in these slides is that the first slide is hidden, but it's highlighted in yellow on the particular things that you would need to fill in. So welcome, your community check-in, and I've added a few different community check-ins in there from the previous one. So if you want to pick something else, your problem of discussion question, task management, actions for next session, and then your launch. The only thing I will say is because the January task management list haven't been released yet, that portion of the presentation for January has not been changed. We can take a couple minutes to look through that. I want to make sure everybody has access to those. And if you have any questions, feel free to unmute. Is everybody able to access their folder? Yeah. Mm. As you're thinking about that, Janelle, I just dropped in the chat a resource that Janelle has from New Principal Academy. In one of the documents in there also includes like a data analysis process worksheet with some questions as you are getting your year 2 principals to think about how they're analyzing data. So if you are going to have a conversation connected to data and to PLCs, that is a great resource for you to consider using. And that you can also like share those documents with the year 2 principals. They may have seen some of them from last year from our data session, so some of that should look familiar, but as always, Janelle has updated that with school quality cycle information as well. So very timely and relevant. Thank you, Janelle, for sharing.
You're welcome. And we linked it to the PLC process this year. So when we think about those pop questions, that kind of came to my mind, the 4 questions of the PLC. So that's in there if that's helpful at all.
All right. I know we haven't had a ton of time because we have had such great discussion as always. I just love meeting with all of you. Are there any other needs, ideas, or questions that you have at this time? No? Okay. And so with that, we do have, again, the 3 cohort meetings, and then our mentor development meeting is not until February, which is crazy, but that's when it is. So if you have any needs in the meantime, in between time, you know, I'm your girl for that. And then just a reminder about your mentor visits with school budgets, because they are tracking everyone's travel a little bit more right now. I speak from experience. So on that one, just making sure that you're having conversations with your DSQ as well as the principal's DSQ, because I know some people have been talking about getting together in real life, as I call it, to do some work together, which I think is amazing. But just have those conversations to make sure everybody is approved to move forward with that. And finally, I launch you all with this. When we help ourselves, we find moments of happiness. But when we help others, we find lasting fulfillment. And that's from Simon Sinek. And as we go into the October slump that Jorvana has called, please remember to take care of yourself, because people are always watching you, and how you take care of yourself is how they then take care of themselves as well. So self-care is really important as we go into these months. And I'll say happy holidays to all of you too. I can't believe this is our last meeting before the new year. But again, reach out if you have any needs. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Bye.